Hello students of HSL 611 and welcome back. We are now looking forward to the second half of the course. This is week 5 and this week we will be covering White chapters 7, 8, and 9, and you know that we have a quiz again at the end of this week, which will be quiz number 4, and it covers the chapters that we have this week, chapter 7, 8, and 9 from the White textbook. Chapter 7 is dedicated to the nursing profession, and there are various issues that are worth focusing in on in this chapter. First off, it is important to recognize that there is a shortage of nurses in this country, and the situation is expected to get worse before it gets better. That has profound implications on education in our country, nursing education in particular, for healthcare organizations that are dependent upon adequate supply of nurses in order to function, and also with the expectations of nursing support staff and the roles that they'll have to take on to help the situation where nurses are, in fact, in short supply in any HCO. The chapter talks about various kinds of professional levels in nurses. We have the baccalaureate nurse, trained nurse. We have advanced practice nurse. We have specialist, and so forth. Get a good handle on what those different titles mean, and you'll be in good stead. Also, there's the idea of advanced practice nurses, or APNs, and that includes individuals who practice in the area of, or who are nurse practitioners. That is, in many states, say like here in Michigan, they do a lot of what physicians are licensed to do. In fact, they can even have their own individual practices as primary caregivers, for example. So they're licensed independently, unlike physician assistants who, by law, have to be supervised directly and fall under the licensure of the physician that supervises them. Then we have nurse midwives who do provide obstetric care and prenatal care and so forth, and then nurse anesthetists who provide the services that anesthesiologists often provide in hospitals. And I've worked in situations where all of the anesthesia was provided by nurse anesthetists working with the various surgeons that we had. It was that difficult to recruit and retain available medical anesthesiologists. Of course, there are other areas of specialty like case managers and clinical nurse leaders, things like that. That's all in the chapter. Take a close look at that. Finally, there are some very important thoughts provided in this chapter related to education and improving nurse effectiveness, and then also how to prepare. This is a very practical issue. How do we prepare nurses to step up and become the supervisors, managers, and leaders of HCOs and other organizations of tomorrow? Chapter 8 in the White text deals with clinical support services, sometimes called ancillary services. And these are all the things that have to exist in addition to the medical core and nursing core within the hospital or the HCO. That includes laboratory services, diagnostic imaging, the operating rooms, the provision of anesthesiology, pharmacy, social services, etc. So there's a lot of clinical areas that need to be provided with specialists who are trained to a great degree, hold special credentialing. That these people just don't walk in off the street without training. These are highly trained people, and are necessary for the functioning of an HCO. This chapter talks about the importance of evidence-based medicine and applying these principles to these individual clinical support services areas. By the way, the abbreviation for this area is CSS. And then how do the CSS areas handle the appropriation and maintenance of changing technologies? How do you recruit CSS professionals? How do you retain them? How do you provide advanced education? How do you keep them on the cutting edge of the technology and the knowledge? Those are extremely important questions that administration needs to answer in order to keep its competitive advantage. Sometimes all the services cannot be directly brought into the facility through employment, and sometimes certain services must be contracted for or even farmed out, so to speak. So these are all things that must be kept in the mix as we look at clinical support services. Chapter 9 in the white text involves community health, and as mentioned earlier by me, unfortunately, the payment for expansion into community health is often not there. So oftentimes HCOs need to be clever in terms of how they help community health agencies and other agencies with a community mission to improve the health status and not go broke in doing so. I say not go broke because, unfortunately, patient education and the provision of various community health services are not reimbursed by the third-party payers, the insurance companies, or even the governmental payers such as Medicare and Medicaid. So it's a tricky set of issues for HCOs that delve into this area. One can see right away in the mission statement of an HCO whether or not they are planning to become more expansive in the area of community health by how many times the term community health comes up. And health improvement for the community comes up, as opposed to a mission that provides like excellent care for patients that are seen within the system. Improvement of primary care is usually high on the list then for community health advocates as well as for the HCO, and so that is a wonderful intersect. Then the development of partnerships, coalitions, and so forth, and actually spending the amount of money and providing the resources necessary to be an effective partner for those that are out there struggling with this good fight. That is very important in expanding in this area. Finally, really understanding what the community's needs are, having effective assessments done and translated into operational goals is a very important part of expansion into community health for HCOs. Along this line, the student is well advised to become familiar with the concept of patient-centered medical homes. That is important in the Affordable Care Act. It's highlighted broadly, but also with various third-party payers across the country, particularly Blue Cross and Blue Shield, who are expanding in this area. As a practical matter, what this means then is that HCOs and physician providers will need to be paid for services rendered in this direction. That means that physicians will be compensated for spending more time with patients, for example, at the initial meeting with the patients, and great amounts of information are being taken in beyond just the normal physical patient history and physical. So take a close look at that, maybe do a little bit of extra study on the internet related to patient-centered medical homes, and you'll be well on your way to understanding this complex area. Okay, that about wraps it up for this week, and I look forward to seeing you at the beginning of next week, week 6. Take care now.